Tim Allen addresses the bizarre plot holes in the Santa Claus movies, plus the Santa Claus theory perfectly explains the weirdest plot hole. Holiday season is right around the corner, and the festive spirit is oozing out of all of us. There's nothing better than to make a cup of hot chocolate and watch all the Christmas movies. It's during these rewatches when you start noticing the plot holes. In this video, we'll be talking about Tim Allen addressing the bizarre plot holes in the Santa Claus movie and how one plot hole can be explained by this one shocking theory. First off, Tim Allen's views on the Santa Claus movies. One of the all-time greatest Christmas movies is the series The Santa Claus. We all grew up watching these movies, but it's only recently that fans started pointing out a few mysterious plot holes in the movie. The star of the movie himself, Tim Allen, takes up the chance to address some of these plot holes himself. In an interview with Jimmy Fallon, Tim addresses a question that probably all of us wondered. How did nobody ask any questions about the previous Santa? Not the elves, not even Mrs. Claus. They just went on with this new guy, Scott Calvin, as the new Santa. Speaking of Mrs. Claus, Tim also questioned her not having a first name. Since it's been a while since these movies came out, there's a possibility some of you might not remember the whole storyline. Christmas stories are supposed to be cheerful and warm, but this one had quite the dark twist in it. How did Scott Calvin land his role as Santa? By accidentally killing the old Santa. Oh, whoops. What was even more interesting to find out, originally, Tim was supposed to shoot Santa. We're glad the writers decided to stick with an accidental death. Why they even had to add this idea, that's still unknown. More to this, the reason behind the spelling of Claus was due to illegality. The writers added the E in Claus as a form of wordplay. Later on, when Scott has to perform his duties as Santa, he agrees to a clause. Yes, we too are still in shock. Fun fact, did you know that Tim Allen wasn't originally going to play Scott Calvin? We can't think of anyone else playing the role of Scott, but did you know that the role was originally written for Bill Murray, who passed on the opportunity? Seems like it all worked out in the end. Next up, Bernard, the special elf. Ever wonder why this one particular elf in the movie was different from all the others? If you have, you're not the only one. People have come up with some interesting theories as to why this one elf was different in age, height, and mannerisms from all the other elves. To refresh your memory, Bernard was the elf who explained the whole Claus situation to Scott when he arrived at the North Pole. It was quite obvious to distinguish him from the other elves. While the role of the other elves was played mostly by children, Bernard seemed to be a bit older than them. And that was the case. The actor playing Bernard, David Krumholtz, was in his teens during the shooting of the film. This 16-year-old boy stood out from the child actors, making his height and age a distinctive factor. Another noticeable factor was his demeanor. While the other elves seemed to be happy-go-lucky all the time, Bernard came off as a bit cold and stern while speaking to Scott. The movie never answered these questions for us, but luckily, fans had some interesting ones. Stay tuned because we still have to reveal this shocking fan theory about Bernard and the original Santa. And now, the Reddit fan theory. Remember the original Santa Claus who fell off Calvin's roof? This one Reddit user seems to think that Bernard might be his son. Seems like a long shot. Here's why this theory makes complete sense. If he was the previous Santa's real son, that would mean that Bernard is a human, but later on decided to transform into an elf to accompany his father. That would also explain his height. Santa sprinkles some of his magic on him, which is why Bernard doesn't age the way normal humans do. That would also explain the confusing matter of age in this whole situation. More to this, Bernard appears to have a higher authority as compared to the other elves. Makes sense, he was after all Santa's son. Up next, does this theory make sense? If the theory still doesn't convince you, fret not, we have some more backup evidence for you. One of the factors that makes this theory super believable is Bernard's behavior towards Scott. He talks to him in a grumpy and stern manner when Scott first arrives at the North Pole. Regardless of the fact that Scott is now Bernard's new boss, this elf is not making the best first impression. Let's say the theory is true. Scott's trip to the North Pole occurs just after Bernard's supposed father's death, the previous Santa. The elf's behavior makes complete sense. Duh, his dad just died and there's a new guy taking his place. Nobody would be too happy about that, especially if this new guy is the reason why the dad died. Bernard doesn't display the happiest set of emotions, but instead takes upon the role of explaining the rules to Scott while keeping the workshop from failing. It seems as though Bernard is not just a grumpy old elf. When it comes to Scott's son, Charlie, Bernard has the kindest attitude towards this kid. He's always nice to him and is constantly seen supporting Charlie throughout the movie. Probably the best example of this is is when Bernard gifts Charlie the snow globe when he first meets him. The reason behind the gift, though, is later on revealed. Bernard explains to Charlie that just by shaking the globe, he can call it his father whenever he's in the world. The movie never provided us with an explanation as to how Bernard was in possession of the snow globe. The theory, however, gives us a sensible explanation. If Bernard really is Santa's son, there's a possibility that he was the owner of this snow globe and used it as a means of communication with his father. Bernard showed his compassionate side when he gifted Charlie with the snow globe, empathizing with him how it's hard to have a father as a Santa. When his own father passed away, he came to the realization that he was no more in need of it, but Charlie was. Hold your horses, we have another surprise for you. Some other Reddit users have enlightened us with their theories about weird plot holes in the movie, and here's what they have to say. Up next, what happened to Mrs. Claus? There's little to nothing that we know about Mrs. Claus's fate. By the time Scott arrived, there was no sign of her. Did she just vanish into the sky? Was she even alive? Here's what a couple of our fellow Redditors had to say. This one user implies that she could have died the same time that Santa did. People seem to think of this theory as quite the misogynistic one. Does a woman's purpose in life die at the same time her husband does? Yikes. If this was true, had the missus already known the risks before marrying Santa? Or did she just magically vanish or die as soon as Scott took over the role of Santa? Unfortunately, there's not much backing information to this theory, but it's still an interesting one. Another user seems to think that as soon as the elves got wind of Santa's death, they informed his wife and told her to, leave. While this might not be as horrible as her dying, it still sort of hints that she really had no other purpose than to serve her Santa. Though we still have questions left unanswered if the theory is true. We still don't know if she's okay, and we certainly knew nothing about her whereabouts. Whatever the case was, the elves decided it was best to never mention her again. We are grateful though, at least she wasn't forced to be Scott's wife due to some other clause. Hey, it's normal we think that. The whole title of the movie is based on a clause. We're not just done with the crazy theories yet. This one user implies that it could be possible there was no wife at the former Santa, since he had just started the gift delivering business. Not sure how this one seems to make a whole lot of sense to us, but hey, it's a free world and we're welcoming all the theories. Lastly, another user points out that Santa might not have actually died. He could have faked his death because he was done with being Santa. He continues to give a whole explanation, telling us that Santa might actually be vacationing on a beach with his Mrs. Claus. Let's give this guy the benefit of the doubt and pretend what he's saying is true, only because we're feeling festive. Of course, these are just theories and there's no concrete evidence to support them, but it's fun to imagine the possibilities and see how they fit into the story of the movie. Did you notice any plot holes of your own? Let us know in the comments down below. Hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more. Thanks for watching. See you next time.
Charlie, you still got the glass ball, right?
Yeah.
Well, all you gotta do is shake it.
Oh no, your pulse is great. Well, I don't know, Scott. You're as healthy as a horse.
Claus.
Oof, easy, Rudolph.
Can't even name the reindeer. No, Rudolph